This, being gently rained on, is the Nikon F3 and is sadly no longer my favourite film SLR. It's been a few months and it's taken a few dozen films, so it's had a good run, but my gear acquisition syndrome and the need for more buttons and dials, which has led me astray so many times in the past, forced me again onto eBay and brought me to this. This is the Nikon F4 and is currently my favourite film camera. Before we take a good look at its features, let's take a few pictures with it. The theme for this particular review will be the beautiful colours, tones, shapes and textures of weathered surfaces. Let's start here in Fife, a small enclosure of fishermen's huts. And nothing trashes man-made structures quite like salt, air, sun, rain and wind. So here's some pictures. In a field, the side of the road near the England-Scotland border, I found this old Dodge fire engine. Looking nice and distressed paint-wise. So I'll get some pictures of this. If the door opens. Probably not. It's probably weathered shut. Anyway. It just almost fell in a hole there. Let's go around the other side. Some nice weathering. That's the main road, the A1, going to England. Not quite in England yet, a few miles. I am going to England tonight though. Gonna go to Lindisfarne. Anyway, get a few photos of this snapped. The Nikon F4 was released in 1988 and would be the final fully button-controlled Nikon camera and the first Nikon camera with autofocus. Although the F4 is fully electronic in terms of its shutter, film control and metering, it does retain the analog switches and dials typical of mechanical cameras, and boy does it retain them. Born of the unholy union of a Nikon F3 and a music studio mixing disc, the Nikon F4 is a button lover's dream. No scrolling through menus with rotary wheels and OK buttons on this bad boy. Every function has its own button, switch or dial, and most of them have their own subset button, usually a locking mechanism to stop you using the parent button without first having to jam your fingernail into a slider or push button to get the parent control to activate. This can be slightly annoying, but I get why they would do this. This was supposed to be a professional camera and consequently came with a full set of restrictions to prevent you accidentally trashing your exposure or film by turning a dial or pushing a switch while putting in or taking it out of his bag. It's still annoying though. And talking of these many buttons, and they are indeed legion, they enable this camera to perform every function a camera from this era could possibly perform. This camera really is fully featured. It has from left to right a film rewind lever. The film is rewound either automatically by activating these two buttons simultaneously, or this one only if you want to use the film rewind lever to rewind the film manually. Here we have the film speed dial and associated unlock button, viewfinder release button, shutter speed selector and associated unlock button, exposure compensation dial and its unlock button, exposure mode selector, multiple exposure lever, shutter button, drive mode, whether single shot, multiple different motor wind options, and a timer with of course its own unlock button. This particular viewfinder, which is removable and changeable, has a metering mode switch and a diopter dial to dial in the settings for your eyesight. Here we have a self-timer LED, mirror lockup lever, depth of field preview button, autofocus and exposure simultaneous lock button, a dedicated exposure lock button and a dedicated autofocus lock button, focus mode selector for autofocus, tracking or manual focus, lens release button. Here's a flash sync terminal. This one has an optional winder which has an extra shutter release button for portrait mode shooting. And finally, because this is just not enough buttons, this one has a data back which can perform so many extra functions I'm not even going to go into them. What's it like to use? I really like this camera. It is without a doubt the most solid camera I have ever held. It feels like if you dropped it on the pavement would break first. Every function is smooth, even the ones you have to press an unlocking button to activate. The metering works really well. I generally use a handheld meter to get exposure settings, but I tested the camera's meter on several occasions by comparing its suggested reading to the handheld meter reading, and it was consistently close enough to encourage me to trust it fully should I ever have to use it. The shutter and film transport systems are very smooth and unassuming. It's fairly quiet compared to my main film camera, the Canon EOS 5. With a 100% field of view, the Nikon F4 also has the clearest, brightest and easiest to focus screen on any camera I've ever used. Now I say this because although I have an autofocus capable lens, and this is an autofocus capable camera, I still really like to manually focus this camera, and the screen not only makes this very easy, but makes it inviting to do so. You want to turn the focus wheel in the lens and see the image achieve sharp focus with your own physical attributes, rather than have a motor do it for you. Talking of focus, this is an autofocus capable camera, and is currently sporting an autofocus lens, but I find the autofocus system on this to be slow and ponderous compared to my Canon cameras from the same era, which are fast and reliable. But that's one of the few negative points of this camera and means nothing to me as I'm using it fully manually. For me, the F4, like its predecessor, the F3, is such a pleasure to use. It makes you want to take photos just to have it in your hand and press its buttons. It, for me, validates the claim that a lot of film photographers mean when they say, it's the process of taking a film image that makes me want to keep using film. It's the process of using this camera that makes me want to keep taking pictures with it. Any downsides? For me, possibly the weight constantly pulling down on your shoulder and the fact that the autofocus is miles behind any Canon autofocus camera. But I'm looking at this from a wandering around in 2025 with a film camera context, just enjoying myself and not needing to worry too much about the images. I don't need to work with this camera, and it was indeed the people who did have to work with this camera, the professionals who bought it when it came out, that had the biggest problem with the F4. Its slow autofocus was said to have pushed many photographers to the Canon EOS 1. As a Canon user from the 90s myself, I can vouch for how good the Canon autofocus system was, and the few times I have used the autofocus system on this assures me that I wouldn't have wanted to rely on it when I was working. Anywho, it's a great camera for 2025, lots of buttons to connect with, and it looks fantastic, like a camera should look. All cameras should look like this, even now, and indeed many current cameras have been produced with a vintage look. Nikon must have been onto something. Anyway, that's all for this review, so from a sunny Edinburgh for once, have a good day.